So I got a comment earlier that makes me feel like I need to clear something up. So it says Cushite does not equal Nubian. Nubian is a Roman word talking about Upper Egypt. The Nubians are Upper Egyptians. Check Smash Rockwell's video. He did a great breakdown on that. And I don't disagree that he did a great breakdown. I prefer if you gave me the title of the video so I could know exactly how to find it. But let me start by saying this. Okay, the word Nubia might not mean Kushite necessarily, but that was not the point of the video. The point of the video was about the Kushites. And of course, the word Nubia has become a catch all for certain people located in, to the south of Egypt. Now, is it true that some of the people that are even lower would not necessarily be considered Nubians? Well, according to Strabo, they absolutely would. As we can see here, we have the Greek translation, which you can take your time to retranslate it yourself. I've taken a bit of time to do that, but this is not my translation. This is from a already done translation. But I did check, and you can see here, you can even see the similarities of the words. Like if you see here, blemies, and if you see there, Ethiopians right there in the second line, second word, and then you can see Noba in the fifth line. So you can see that the word Nuba or Noba is being used. So let's see if the word Nubia, according to Strabo, only is talking about Upper Egypt and not referring to the entire Nubian areas all the way down to Sudan. So he says, the Red Sea are inhabited by Megarbari and Blemis, who are subject to the Ethiopians and border on the Egyptians, and along the sea by Troglodytes. The Troglodytes, opposite Meroe, are 10 or 12 days' journey distance from the Nile, but the parts on the left side of the course of the Nile in Libya are inhabited by Nube. These are the Nubians in question. Now, listen to how far they extend. So, are they just in Upper Egypt? These are the Nube, remember, the Nubians. A large tribe who, beginning at Meroe, extend as far as the bends of the river and are not subject to the Ethiopians, but are divided into several separate kingdoms. The extent of Egypt along the sea of the Palisade to the Canabic mouth is 1,300 stadia. Okay, so we've got the information there. So there's different people already. All of them would be considered black Africans, but they are divided into several groups. So you have the Megabari, you have the Blemis, you have the Ethiopians, which, by the way, the Ethiopians here refer to the people just south of Egypt. And then you have, as you can see there, and border on the Egyptians. And then you can see that they refer to the Nuba as a kingdom. So the Nuba is a kingdom that stretches all the way down to Meroe. Now, take a guess what kingdom that is. So this powerful kingdom that stretches from Egypt, the left side of Egypt, all the way down to Meroe. What kingdom could that possibly be? Who exactly was ruling Meroe? We know that there was a powerful kingdom that ruled all the way to 300 AD. But what kingdom was that? According to Strabo, during his time, this kingdom stretched from Egypt to Meroe. So let's check. So over here we have something interesting going on. So this is the battle written about down by Strabo about the battle between the Kandake or Candace and the Romans. And as you can see here, it says, among these fugitives were the generals of the Queen Candace, who was ruler of the Ethiopians in the time, a masculine sort of woman and blind in one eye. These one and all he captured alive, having sailed after them in both rafts and ships, and he sent them forth with down to Alexandria. Okay, so the word Candace or Kandake is a Meroitic word. So we know that these people are from Meroe and they represent the Ethiopians. We also know that the word Kush is the name of the kingdom that the Kandake was ruling. So from Meroe, Kush, the Nuba, all of that is the same thing. That word Nubia is interchangeable with the word Kush. And at the time, the word Ethiopian was the one that was mainly interchangeable with the part just south of Egypt. But even there, you can see that the word is this extending thing that goes back and forth. Now, of course, I could go and look up all the other people like Diodorus Siculus or whoever to find more evidence that they did say this, but I think this is sufficient enough. But I don't even care, to be honest, about whether or not they did this because the main video was not about that. The main video was about the kingdom of Kush, also known as Nubia, and what they did in the Assyrian regions, and that people who would later, and of course the other text that I was going to show was multiple Greek people agreeing that yes, they saw Nubians even in their time as far as Gaza. So stationed in Asia are a bunch of Nubians who, today, the a lot of Egyptologists, they find it very convenient, I guess is the word, to say that no, up until maybe about 700 AD, you don't start seeing Africans in Asia, which is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. But again, that was a video for some other thing. Now, to talk about later comings, as this person here who asked the question says, I'm not trying to disagree with you, but remember, ancient India was called Ethiopia East, and some of the Kush's children went into the area and they were dark skinned. So here's where, first of all, I don't know if we have that much of a disagreement, but let's talk about a couple things. One, Kush is a bit of a later kingdom, and of course, I do believe that some Kushites went to that area, but the video was how the religion of the Indians came from India into the Egyptian regions. This is opposite to what you're saying, where you're saying the Egyptians went to India, which, there is some evidence of this through trade and certain items that are found in that region. But of course, religion wouldn't have played a big deal. But let me first start by talking about the first part. I'm not trying to disagree with you, but remember, ancient India was called Ethiopia East. So the people who called it the East of Ethiopia were later people. These were people like Herodotus. These were people like, they're basically the Greeks. They called it Ethiopia to the east, and all the way until the Muslim Golden Age, Indians were actually called black people. And I don't mean that in like a, oh, they were dark skinned. No, 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 no. People in the past had this idea that Indians were Hamites and that they were the same as the black people of Africa, and that all of these groups had the same temperament, that they had the same all of that. So I agree with you that yes, they called it Ethiopia East, and they continued to try and draw similarities. And of course, there are some similarities between India and Africa which cannot be explained yet and must be seen through a different lens. The use of dung in prime, like very primal houses, elephants being found in both India and Africa, but then not being found that much in the Middle East. A whole bunch of stuff. Certain items of clothing like cotton, seeming like they came from either or linen, seeming like they either came from India or Africa and they spread. But again, these are just speculations. But that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. The problem with the argument that I was talking about is a lot of the religion of India is a later religion. It's not something. It's not. It has nothing to do with the Indus Valley religion. The real similarities, which proves that the Indo-Europeans did spread at a later period from the Indian areas all the way to the European areas. They came mainly from close to Asia, and they spread in two ways, is by looking at their gods and looking at their names. As you can see here, Zeus and Indra have a lot in common. Now, of course, the word Indra is not doesn't sound anything like Zeus, but if you take the word Zeus, right, which the Z used to be a D, it would be Deus. Deus is what people say today when they've, let's say, taken on the word to from the Romans or the Greeks to make it sound similar to their god when they were adopting their god. So God in the Latin speaking world is Deus or Dios, meaning God. Now, of course, do we have any examples of words like this in India? The word Deva, meaning a god in Indian languages, including Sanskrit, is the equivalent to the word Dios. And we know this because of a lot of English similarities that came from several areas of the world. So let's take a few words in English that have to do with this word Deva, and Devi being the female version of this word. So the word divine comes from this Indo-European language. The word day comes from this. The word deity. You can see all these words sort of have something to do with God. And they all are around the same sort of sky god. Now, of course, in the case of Indra, his name is not Deva, but Indra is an important sky god, the same way that Zeus is. This is the same general line of religion. The religions of the people of the Greeks and the Greco-Romans, are the same as that of the let's call them Southeast Asians, but not all of them, because there are some religions of the Southeast Asians that are native to the region and have nothing to do with the culture of the people who were taken. I mean, like the Andamanese religions are very different. And of course, you don't need gods to show that these cultures are similar. You can just look at their numbers. For example, if you start with one, it's Eka, which is the same as one. This is Sanskrit, by the way. Dva, which is two, or Dvya in other languages. Trey, or Traya, which is three. Katvara, which is going to be close to a different language, but it's four. Panka, which is similar to pent, like a pentagon or something like that. Panch, another one that is similar, which is five. Sat, which is six. Sapta, seven. Asta, eight. Nava, nine. The similarities are obvious. The similarities of these gods are Greek Indian related. And I'm talking about all of them. If you go and look at the Greek gods, the general sightings of them, the general way they work, are very similar to those in India. Whereas the ones in Egypt, even though the Greeks tried to connect them, like, okay, so they worship a war god and we worship a war god, therefore they're the same. No, the ancient Egyptians, completely different uh, gods to almost anybody else, except of course the Nubians, the Africans in general. I mean, if you look at Africa, their gods are so similar to those of the ancient Egyptians that it's not even funny. And of course, the culture of the religion is similar. So to answer your question, absolutely, the people of India were once considered Ethiopia East, but this was just based on the fact that they are dark skinned, which is what I'm talking about today. We call it the melanated people. I mean, I agree with you that we have a similarity with these people and that we should look at the similarity deeper than what they're trying to do today, where they try to untie us by looking at DNA, as if people in the past, when they said black, they were talking about DNA. Of course, they were talking about anyone who's especially very dark skinned, which we find that all over India. But this does not take away from the fact that the culture of India is vastly different. Even the later religion and culture is vastly different than that of Egypt. Egypt is probably the most unique place on Earth if you don't count the continent. And of course, I'm going to talk about the land of Punt and all of that, which they will show you that, they call it God's land. They call the entire continent of Africa God's land, meaning that this is where our religion stems from, this continent. Here's an example of a practice done medically by the Egyptians and by blacks in general, as reported by one of the Greeks, but through Alfred Draper, someone who wrote in the 1600s. The Egyptians, as Columnar reports, bind the teeth to any part troubled with the cramp, or carry about them a ring made thereof. With these the blacks imagine they preserve themselves from many diseases. So, as you can see here, he's talking about a very specific medical procedure that is done in Egypt that he notices is done all over Africa. And this is not even, I'm not even talking about the vague ones that I've given you, like bloodletting and all of that. This is a very specific one. And so he carries on and gives evidence that he's seen this in other black nations. And this is what he's drawing the similarity to ancient Egypt. He says, the four seahorses which Peter van der Broek in his journey to Angola saw on the land of Loanga were like great bustles, slick skinned, with heads like wild horses, short ears, wide nostrils.